If you ask for money, you'll get advice. But if you ask for advice, you'll get money. How does that sound to you? You've probably heard that before, but you've never heard it here. And you've never heard me say it in any workshop that I've done or any podcast episode or anywhere, because I think it is the most misleading piece of advice that can be given to anybody who is new to fundraising. Why this advice is so common in today's fundraising, that is our focus on this episode. Let's huddle up. Hey, welcome to another episode of Huddle Up with Mark, the Fund Coach. I'm Mark Duncan. Great to be with you. Once again, I always want to remind you to subscribe and to like this content, share it with as many people that you know, especially those who are nonprofit leaders. Feel free to let them know about this podcast. You can also go to my website and subscribe to the email that you get that alerts you when the podcast is up, both audio and video. Also, want to remind you that I have this free resource, 5 Habits of Executive Directors Who Land Big Gifts. Great resource. You can grab this free guide. All you have to do is click the link below and download your copy. So, if there is one thing that has frustrated me more over the years, is this piece of advice about if you ask for money, you'll get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. Absolutely the most ridiculous and probably the most unfounded piece of fundraising advice ever. Now, I hear this and I've heard this for years. And I know there's a Pitbull song that has lyrics similar to this. You know, if you ask for, money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money twice, something along those lines. And so that doesn't help either. But this piece of advice is not sound advice. In fact, what this advice does, right? Think about how you feel when you hear that. It actually, if you don't know or you're not engaged in relationship fundraising, major gifts fundraising, it probably feels comforting to hear that. It probably gives you a sense of, oh, well, that's all I really need to do is I just need to, if I want money, I'm going to ask for advice. And if I want advice, I'm going to ask for money. Right. And that's it. That sums up major gifts fundraising in 2 sentences. But that is not the case. I want to talk a little bit about where this actually came from. I talked about the song a moment ago, but this is usually taught. It's kind of a clever hack, right? To make big donors feel important, right? So a lot of donors will hear this, right? But it's also a way to warm up prospects before you even dare ask them for a gift, right? And it makes it seem like it's something you can do almost immediately. But think about when you heard this, like, how'd you feel? Did you feel relieved, manipulated, confused, right? What were your thoughts when you heard this? Um, and I apologize for my clear visual and probably audible frustration, because this is fresh for me. I just had a call with a client recently, in the past week, And this is something that they heard from someone else. And we talked about this, you know, and it really sort of flies in the face of everything that, I'd been teaching. And then this person absolutely agreed. This was something that they heard from someone else and, sort of mentioned it, in the context of our session. And I thought, you know what, this is something worthy of exploration and explanation. And so that's why I'm choosing to talk about it here. It does give a sense of, you know, safety and comfort. Feels clever and strategic, you know, and it's why it's such an attractive phrase, right? It's, just endless um, coffee chats, picking your brain, getting your wisdom, right, with no clear goals as it relates to the relationship, right? So, where does this actually get you? How is this a strategy? Think about that for a minute. If that's your key strategy, ask for money and get advice, ask for advice and get money. How does that translate to building a meaningful relationship with an individual and understanding where they are and how they feel about your mission? So I think there are three things and three reasons why, or not three reasons why, three things that happen as a result of people sort of following this piece of advice. Number one, gives you a false sense of security. Like, wow, that's all I have to do. Great. I'm going to go out there and I'm just going to, follow this process and I'm going to raise a lot of money. Right. If I just get enough advice meetings, the money will magically flow. Let me know how that's working for you. In reality, especially after, years, right, of advice conversations with a wealthy donor, you may never receive a significant gift, especially if you never test their interest, engage with them to understand what's important to them about what you do. What is their philanthropic interest? What are the things that they've given to in the past? And sometimes that doesn't come out of conversation, that also comes out of research. You've got to do your homework. You've got to explore alignment. And you've got to be authentic and you have to ask questions. Questions that are going to help you learn more about what's important to them about what you do. So that false sense of security is key. The second thing is that I really think that this comes across as a very passive aggressive way to go about soliciting major gifts. Like, you're not being direct. You're going in and you're asking for advice, and it's a passive aggressive way to ask for money. And it does not bode well for your credibility as a nonprofit leader. And that bleeds into the credibility of the organization that you represent. Because how you position yourself as you're engaging with donors is a clear representation of your organization. You see, your board chose you if you're the executive director. Your executive director chose you if you're the head of development because they believe that you are the best to represent the mission externally. See, this work is really important. It's not about sitting, right in an office and, making phone calls or sitting in an office and writing emails. It's about you picking up the phone and scheduling visits with people and getting out in the community and talking about who you are as an organization and what you do. And when you ultimately do ask, you want to come across as authentic. You also want to make sure that you're asking when they are ready. So, again, this advice doesn't make any sense to me. Be curious to hear any feedback any of you have about this, if you've followed this process and it's consistently worked. The final reason why uh, this is something that is not a good thing to do. So, first, it gives you a false sense of security. Secondly, I think it's passive aggressive. Finally, it actually just skips the real work of building that trust, building that clarity, engaging, learning about them, right? That all gets dismissed in this statement. When in that statement is there room for you to clearly articulate your mission? Where in that statement is there room for you listening? Where in that statement is there for you to ask meaningful questions that will help you learn more about that individual and what drives them? Where in that statement does it help you understand what language they speak? And what I mean by that is whether or not they speak head versus heart. Where does that fit in that statement? It doesn't. It's an easy out. And unfortunately, it's very misleading and it makes it seem like that's all you need to do. And you're going to hope that donors will magically, voluntarily give you money, large sums of money. I've been in this nonprofit space now for 38 years. And I have been specifically in the fundraising space for 27 of those years. And at no time have I ever had any success following that advice, because when I have asked for money, I believe that I did it at the right time and in the right way when the donor was ready, and I would get a gift. And most of the time it was the gift I asked for. Sometimes it might have been a little bit less, especially if that was my initial ask. But then going forward, I was able to create that, what I call that baseline gift, that allowed me to solicit more and more and more year after year. And not just me going back to them once a year, but maintaining a relationship with them on behalf of your mission. There's real work that needs to be done here. And if you are working within a system, I think I talked about this in the last episode, then this piece of advice is something that you won't even be thinking about, because you'll be following a system that helps you build trust, that exudes leadership, that puts your organization's best foot forward, that listens to your donors and helps you understand what's important to them about what you do. And then you speak that language to them. And that is how you position yourself for an ask. Now, are you going to ask donors for advice? Yes, sure. But be sure that you're just asking for advice and you have no expectation of a gift. You may want their feedback on something, but if you have an authentic, meaningful relationship with them, then they're going to give you their feedback on whatever advice you're asking for. And that's it, because they trust you. If you start this relationship that way, your donors are not going to trust you if they think that you're going to ask for advice and expect money. If you want to compromise the integrity of a relationship on behalf of your mission, by all means, go ahead and follow that advice. But if you want to be successful and do this well, you have to understand that individuals, we're all different. So imagine those two sentences, that one piece of advice: ask for money and get advice, or ask for advice and get money. That's supposed to work for everybody. Every single donor is the same. I don't think so. So if you hear that advice again, remember this episode, remember this moment, because for those of us who have been in this space for a while, and I think, quite frankly, anyone who is comfortable engaging with people certainly understands that that is a very, very super simplified way to think that you're going to be successful with fundraising. This is nothing more than cultural folklore. And I hope that if you hear this advice again, or hear this sort of casually said, sometimes it's often said by those who are not in the business, meaning that sometimes it comes from volunteers, maybe it just comes from somebody casual who, and you don't need to respond to it. I'm certainly not asking you or suggesting that you know, get on your soapbox like I'm on now and get defensive. I'm not saying that at all. Just be mindful that that piece of advice is not sound advice. And my hope is that that you think before you act on it. And quite frankly, that you recognize that there's so much more to this than that statement. I'm going to stop here. And I hope that this has been helpful to you. There may be a part two to this. I'm not quite sure. But it's important enough, I believe, that it warranted, again, exploration and explanation so that you understand the importance of relationships, and that every human being that you interact with on behalf of your mission is not the same. This is very nuanced. Yes, in my relationship fundraising method, there are phases that you follow, but within those phases, there is so much room for you to build that sound, authentic connection that will lead to a significant gift. Those steps are meant to guide you so that you know when they are ready to be asked. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I'd love to engage in conversation about this, especially if you've heard this before. Feel free to drop a comment below the video, or you can respond to the email if you're on my email list. My email is mark@thefundcoach.com. And I hope you found this helpful. And as always, this fundraising thing, it's not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. Thanks. We'll see you next time.